this is Mr. Coates, and this is APES lecture number 34 on food security. We're starting a new unit with this, and we're going to get into food, agriculture, soils, and pest management. This video is all on food security and malnutrition. A lot of things that I notice when I talk to students, I ask them, where does your food come from? And invariably they always answer from the store. And some of them really don't understand how food does get made and get to the store. Obviously the store doesn't produce the food, they just sell it to you. So it's a good idea to know where our food comes from, what the food issues are in the world, and maybe how we can produce some more food for that bigger population that's coming about. Alright, so undernourishment in the world. Undernourishment is one of the biggest problems we have with the world, mostly because of poverty, but also it's not the fact that we don't have enough food. It's the fact that we don't have a very good distribution system at all for the food. We have enough food, we just can't get it to those places very well. So this map shows you some of the most undernourished countries in the world. Obviously, a lot of nations in Africa have a lot of problems with food, getting enough food, but also just moving the food around. A lot of government issues going on. We'll talk about that as we move on. Places in the Middle East as well, some places in Asia, and closer to home, some places in Central America also have problems with malnourishment. So let's look and see, what is malnourishment or undernourishment? Basically, it stems from not having enough calories, not having enough fats, not enough lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals that you need in your diet. Anytime you're deficient in something that you actually need in your diet, that's called malnutrition. Now, in countries that are highly malnourished, they have usually diets that are very high in starches. For example, grains like rice and corn. However, these alone cannot supply the dietary needs for humans. And so we have lots of problems with getting enough calories, getting enough minerals and vitamins to everybody on the planet. You notice this poor little boy right here, obviously he's not getting enough protein in his diet. He may be getting a lot of carbs, but he's not getting enough of the protein to put some meat on his bones, and consequently he's basically starting to wither away. When we have a famine, there are lots of problems that occur with famines. Usually, obviously, we have severe shortage of food, mass starvation. We're talking starvation on the order of thousands of people over a short period of time starving to death. In the 1980s, I remember there was an incident in Ethiopia in Africa where there was a huge famine. Every day, hundreds of people just dying because they just didn't have enough food. It was pretty sad. If you ever hear that song, We Are the World, that song basically came about because of that famine, and they were trying to get enough funds and money and food to stop that famine. And also economic chaos occurs in these countries. Usually the governments aren't very stable. They don't have the means to get food to their people, or they take food from their people in order to control their people. Now, the problem with famine is that there's lots of diseases associated with famine and malnutrition. Some of these diseases you need to know about. First one is kwashiorkor. Kwashiorkor is just a protein deficiency. This little boy here, like we saw before in the other picture, once again characterized by large pot bellies here, but very little body mass whatsoever. There's not a whole lot of muscle on him at all, so basically he's just lacking protein. Once again, these people often have a very high diet in starches. Rice and corn, so they get this pot belly, but they don't get meat anywhere else on their bodies. And that's kwashiorkor. Another common disease with malnutrition is vitamin A deficiency, also known as xerophthalmia. And this is basically a vitamin A deficiency, and it causes blindness, causes problems with your eyes. And this basically, because you don't have enough vitamin A, you can't produce enough moisture for your eyes, and your eyes end up drying out, and you can go blind because of that. You have iodine deficiency, then you get what we call a goiter, which is this lady here. This lady here has a goiter, and basically this makes your thyroid gland swell up because you don't have enough iodine in your body. If she was to get more iodine in her diet, eventually her thyroid would shrink back down to normal size. But obviously she is not getting enough iodine. Here in the States we don't have that problem, and that's because our government has decided to put iodine in our salt. If you read a salt bottle or a container, it says iodized salt on it, and that's to prevent goiters here in the United States. And you never see goiter here in the United States. Marasmus is another one, just an overall vitamin deficiency. All kinds of different things can happen with marasmus. Once again, lower immunity is one of those big ones. You can have all kinds of discolorations of your nails. You can also have eye problems, development problems, especially in children. So that's marasmus. And then another one that happens, and this one even happens in the United States, is anemia. Anemia is a loss of iron. You don't have enough iron in your diet, and this is important for blood clotting and also the transport of oxygen in your blood. Iron is very important in that, and if you don't have iron, then your blood doesn't clot very well, and you can't transport oxygen very well throughout your blood. Now, when we lack food security, we have what we call food insecurity. This often leads to hunger and malnutrition, and sometimes even to famines. This is mostly due to, of course, poverty, people not having enough money to buy food or to get food to themselves. Political upheaval is a big problem as well, especially in those developing countries where you have different factions always fighting over land or over power. Because of religious beliefs or political beliefs or some other thing that's fairly inconsequential compared to people starving to death. You have government corruption. A lot of governments are corrupt. Their leaders are corrupt. They take money from the people. They hold their people for ransom. They hold food for ransom from their people. And then, of course, any kind of war or strife happening in the country will stop the movement of food in the country. And so the problem with all of these things is that it severely disrupts food transport. If you look in here, this map shows countries that have huge problems with governments. So in these countries right here, especially in Africa, they've had a lot of problems with governments overthrown very rapidly and haven't had long periods of stable governments. These countries are some of those areas where we have those same malnutrition issues I showed you previously. And it's all because of their governments just can't get their act together to help out their people, or there's a lot of corruption, or they hold food for ransom. So where does our food come from? Croplands produce most of our food. 77% of the food that we eat in this country comes from croplands. That's your corn, your wheat, your vegetables, and fruits. Rangelands and feedlots, that supplies another 16%. That is where our cattle and our pigs and our chickens come from in this country. And then the remaining 7% is from ocean fisheries and aquaculture. Fortunately, as we saw when we talked about aquaculture, this is starting to increase. So because this is increasing, rangelands and feedlots don't have to increase. Doesn't have to, and it's going to be difficult for any of these others to increase. All right, so what has been some of the changes in agriculture over the years? In the 50s, global food production increased dramatically, starting with the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and this is called the Green Revolution. And basically what happened is that here in the United States and some other developed countries, we started farming large tracts of land with monocultures. We started increasing the use of farm machinery. We could farm bigger areas faster. We increased the use of fertilizers, that nitrogen and phosphorus we've been talking about. We increased the use of pesticides to keep down pests eating our crops. And so consequently, over those years, our actual production of crops has increased. The problem is that also at the same time, our population has increased, not just in the United States, but also worldwide. And so if you look and you take the amount of food available per person, we basically have leveled off. You really don't see an increase in food on the planet when you compare it to the amount of people that are increasing on the planet. And if the amount of people keep on increasing on the planet, this is going to start to go down, and hunger is going to become a bigger problem worldwide than it is now. Well, that's all I have about food production, malnourishment. The next lecture we'll talk about agriculture and how we can increase those food supplies.